A very, very good evening. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. And welcome back to the Dan Really Likes Wine Cellar. I've been on the road for the last few weeks, as you will have noticed. And in fact, I would have been down in the Cape today, but given the revolting weather, my trip down got cancelled. And so I'm actually quite happily at home, sitting in my cellar and awaiting the company of 4 women to continue my wine education as we continue Women in Wine on Dan Really Likes Wine. It's been a tremendous month, and we've spoken to some incredible women on the show. It's been a really uplifting space and a very educating one. I've learned an enormous amount, drunk some fabulous wine, and told some great stories in the company of some terrific guests, and that, I have no doubt, will continue this evening. And I'm going to be introducing those guests in just a moment and welcoming them on for what is very much a theme of education, because all in their own specific ways have a hand in teaching and passing on knowledge and focusing on helping people understand how the wine industry works. And I'm very excited to have the quartet that we do this week. But just before I do that, I need to give a quick shout out to a few people from my recent undercover trip down to the winelands. It was a family trip, so I was trying not to do too much work, but there was a bit of wine tasting. And so a big thank you, amongst others, to Michael and Rose Jordan. Spent some time at Plaisir and at Bartony, drinking in particular the Bartony cabs and the Chardonnays out of that little corner of the Banhook. Just get better and better. And the Grand Plaisir down at the newly named Plaisir, formerly Plaisir de Mel, also drinking delightfully. Had some wine with Gareth Robertson and the team at Tuanni Rupert. Also some bubbles out at La Borie. I went and visited their little restaurant space, nice and open and COVID friendly. Had a chance to have a look at that. Also some time at Taibosch with the Taibosch team, Skulk Willem and crew, which includes their Pink Valley estate next door. 2 huge wine estates, each only makes 1 wine. And that's why Skulk Willem can play quite so much golf. He doesn't. He's a very hardworking man. He gave me some of his terrific red blend. It's a red blend that is only going to get better. Also some Rust and Freda and their wonderfully simple restaurant. There are 3 dishes on the menu, 2 steaks and a piece of fish. Vegans, maybe not the ideal spot. And the Rust and Freda Reds under Jean Engelbrecht's guidance, just drinking quite marvelously. Also some time at Boschendal, and thank you to Shirley and Anya and the team there, and had the chance to try some new stuff from Ken Forrester, including, and look out for this if you can get it, a wine called The Bridge. It's a 2014 Californian Cab Sav. Ken himself flew over, paired up with a top young Californian winemaker, and they made what is an absolutely thumping Cabernet Sauvignon. There's nothing subtle or withdrawn or gentle about it. It's a big blockbuster of a wine, much like Ken himself. And we're going to be trying it in the next couple of months and chatting to both Ken and his Californian sidekick about what brought this wine together and see just how good it is. Spoiler alert, it's pretty good. So that's what I've been doing over the last little while, visiting some of the winelands. Also, Tom Orpin and the team at Warwick, some 2011 trilogy, which was great. And that's a reminder, we've got Norma Radcliffe on the show next week, but more about that a little later. Let's have a look at who is on the show this week. And it is a collection of people I hold in very high esteem for the wonderful work they do in the industry, in no particular order. Tuanni Price joins us, who I know through the BLACC Cellar Club, who's a great South African wine import. Cathy Marston, who's currently locked in a cupboard in London somewhere, fighting off COVID and quarantining. Ilse Ruthford, who's one of the quiet power brokers of wine in Stellenbosch, and Heidi Duminy, who drinks her way through the Cape Wine Academy on a weekly basis and judges just about every competition in the country and does so brilliantly. It's a wonderful collection of guests. Guys, welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate it, and great to have you all, and be able to tell your stories and talk a little bit about wine and answer some particularly pertinent questions. And Tuanni, your question is probably the most pressing because you've got a very strange South African accent, which I think can be ascribed to some slightly non-South African roots. Give us a little bit about your background, the Californian story, and how you find yourself for half a year or thereabouts staying in South Africa.
First of all, I love South Africa. I just love the wine community here. I just feel like it's really embraced me a lot. I moved to South Africa in 2018, and I am the director of education for the nonprofit organization BLACC Cellar Club. And yeah, during COVID, I hosted a lot of master classes where I invited winemakers, vineyard managers to come on, talk to us. We were studying for our WSET level 2, so we were kind of like following the book along, and it worked because I passed with merit. So yeah.
The allure of South Africa for us is not hard to see, and you've clearly got a very strong and passionate wine background. But where does that background come from? How did you find your way into wine and into the Californian wine scene?
So oddly enough, although California is a great area for wine, I didn't grow up drinking wine at all. My parents didn't drink wine at home. I found wine when I was in my late 20s, and I got embarrassed at a restaurant. So I went to a 5-star restaurant. I was hosting the dinner, and the sommelier was super snobby, and he just made me feel really intimidated, embarrassed about wine. So after that, I said, I'm going to learn as much as I can about wine. And I started studying wine on my own. And then I started taking classes with the Society of Wine Educators and just different organizations. I studied with the North American Sommelier Association. And I just fell in love with the whole culture of wine, food pairing, the lifestyle, everything. And eventually I started my business during wine tasting. And now I teach classes online, and I host an annual event that showcases the wines made by women and people of color.
So an unconventional wine background. And it's fascinating to me how many people we have on the show who don't come from a wine background, either nothing at all or very limited in terms of family drinking wine. But you found your way into it. You found your way into Californian wine. What was it that caught your attention about South Africa? How did you discover South African wine? How did you fall in love with us all?
So I have been traveling for wine. I had been to Spain a couple times. I had been to Italy, to France, to Mexico even, right? But I had not come to South Africa. And honestly, I was a little scared to come to South Africa because it was so far away from home, and I thought it would be super expensive. There were all these barriers. But then I said, okay, before I go to another European country, let me go to the motherland. And I came to South Africa by myself for the first time in 2016. So I came in 2016. As soon as I got off the plane, I tell people this all the time. I had this like warmth come over me, and it was in July, right? So it was cold, but I just had this warmth come over me, and it just made me feel like welcome home. Like I heard this whisper, this feeling that said welcome home. And so ever since then, and I spent 2 weeks in Stellenbosch and 1 week in the city. So I literally just did wine tasting every single day in Stellenbosch. I hired a driver, and we just went from wine farm to wine farm. And at that time, I didn't really know too much about the wine scene, but it was easy in South Africa. So I went to the big dogs. I went to Cara, Delagraph, to Lima, to all the big wineries. And then the next year I came, I started to discover the smaller wineries. One of the wineries that I fell in love with was De Toorn. And so when I came in 2017, I tasted at De Toorn. And then when I came in 2018, I called De Toorn, I emailed them, and I said, hey, listen, I want to work harvest. Can I come work harvest for you guys, volunteer, whatever? And they were like, okay, sure, come on. And so I worked harvest with De Toorn in 2018. So buy that vintage, because it has like definitely my handprint in it.
I've always thought there was just a touch of exotic to it, and definitely their finest yet. So we've got you now as very much a South African, and I want to explore a bit more about what you're doing here. You're not the only one, though, who doesn't have the most distinctive of South African accents. Let's head over to a little corner of locked down London. Cathy, Marston, very warm welcome to the show. Before we get a little bit on your wine journey, there must have been something fairly important for you to do in order to sacrifice so much time sitting in 8 square feet of a low-ranking London hotel in quarantine.
Yes, that's right. I'm actually here hoping as long as I can keep on testing negative for COVID, I'm hoping to sit my Master of Wine practical exams next week. So I sat the theory before in 2019 and passed those. And then I was meant to sit in 2020, but as we know, the world stopped. So that was the end of that. So now I am hoping, fingers crossed, to finally sit those exams and then move on to the final stage, and then hopefully quite soon after that become a Master of Wine. Fingers crossed.
Which speaks of an enormous dedication to the world of wine, and it's one that you clearly have. What was your wine background? How did you first fall in love with the topic, with the subject, with the bottle of wine?
Well, I got to it through marketing, actually. So I went to an interview with a wine merchant for a marketing position, and they said, "What do you drink?" And at the time, it's a bit embarrassing. So the only wine that I used to drink at the time came from Asda, which is one of the cheaper supermarkets here in the UK, and it was called Sicilian Red. And the reason that we drank it was because about every second month or so, they would sell a litre for the price of 75 centilitres, and that was the only wine that we really drank. And I actually told them that in my interview, and I can't believe that they gave me the job. It was a big surprise. But once I'd got the job in marketing, they believed very strongly that anyone who started working for them in whatever capacity needed wine education. So they then put me through all my WSET exams, finishing up with my level 4 diploma. So that was really how I got into it from a marketing point of view.
So that's the journey into wine, and I love the fact that you were given that opportunity and clearly seized it very enthusiastically. Asda, not a supermarket we're familiar with here in South Africa. How did the journey into South Africa take place?
Well, the company I was working for was called Adnams, and they were a brewery. And so the wine department was really only there to put wine into their pubs. And after I'd been there about 5 years, they decided to not exactly downscale the wine department, but to make it much more of a commodity. And they merged all the marketing between the brewery marketing and the winery marketing together. And so I got made redundant. And it really just seemed like a very good opportunity to go and travel. So husband and I, we looked at different places to go. We looked at, different countries, and we ended up in South Africa because it was sunny. They spoke English and made wine. And so we came to South Africa, and I think it was probably the best decision we made. I'm not sure I'd have gotten so well if we'd gone to South America. My Spanish is really terrible. So, and my Portuguese is worse.
Now, there's some good Malbec in Argentina and some nice wine in Chile, but I think South Africa shaded. All right, so we've got you here, and we're very happy to have you here in South Africa, and very happy to have you on the show ahead of your exams. We've got no doubt will be a great success. Ilse, what about your wine story? You're now with Compagniesdrift, and I'll get you to talk us through exactly what you do there shortly. But how did you discover wine and discover working in the world of wine?
After matric, I studied marketing at the Boland College in Stellenbosch, and I also decided to do some marketing courses, wine courses through the Cape Wine Academy. And I actually did very well. I was one of the top performers in marketing and also at Cape Wine Academy. And so I just decided, why not start working at wine farms and see how it goes. I started out as a casual doing wine tastings in a wine farm in Franschhoek. And it's now 22 years later, and I'm still in the wine industry, starting from wine tasting to doing administrative exports to freight forwarding. And today I'm doing a bit of everything from wine to logistics.
And it's clearly more than just a job. You've spent so much time in it. You've gathered so much knowledge, clearly have a lot of passion for it. What's the magic of wine for you? Why does it hold such an attraction?
I think because that was my first job and I started in the wine industry, I just had a passion for wine, and not only the wine, but for the industry itself. It's just nice to work with. It's the environment, it's different. It's not just in an office. You meet such a lot of people, just everything of the wine industry, and being in the wine industry is magical. It's just different. I don't see me anywhere else.
When you first started those wine tastings and getting a little bit of a feel for it, the Cape Wine Academy, which we'll talk to Heidi about in a moment, did you sense then that wine was probably your destiny, that this is what you were going to spend the next 20 years and more doing?
Not at all, because I also grew up in a family that we don't drink wine, and I think still it's now it's very difficult for my parents that we enjoy wine. So even though we have parties, we don't drink and enjoy wine in front of them because of our culture and also just out of respect. So, but when I did the courses, I actually just loved it, and I knows wines very well, and I can also recognize varieties very well. But that wasn't my interest. When I started at Amani doing wine tastings, I actually came to a point where I had to decide: do I want to do winemaking or just stick to the marketing? And I always had a more interest in the marketing side and the admin side of the wine industry than the drinking part. I'm enjoying it, but I'm not don't like the technical part of it.
Well, it's placed you in a really cool position. We'll talk about what that position and what that company is in a second. I could see a very large smile on Heidi's face when the Cape Wine Academy was mentioned, because that, of course, is your space. It must give you so much joy, Heidi, when you see how many people have come through the Cape Wine Academy who've used the platform, whether it's just to increase their own personal knowledge, interest, love of wine, or somebody like Ilse as a gateway to more work within the wine industry.
Absolutely, Dan. It's also because the Cape Wine Academy was really where my love of wine started, because I grew up in a German family where wine was also neither drunk nor spoken of. And I was shipped off to Germany after school to do exchange, to learn German, and to become more German. And I learned a lot about beer. Even though I was living on the Rhine in the middle of the wine regions, I had no idea. And when I came back and was deciding what to study, it was actually my big mouth that led me to wine, but first through food. I wanted to be the best chef that ever there was. So I went to a hotel school, and we had to do the Cape Wine Academy courses. And it was only there that I really discovered the love of wine, and it was through the Cape Wine Academy courses. And after a hotel school, I worked for 5 years abroad, mostly in London, in kitchens, and that is where I encountered more, different wines of the world. It's like my portfolio and palate grew substantially. And when we returned, I was still in the kitchen, and by complete chance, got offered the opportunity to interview as a Kahlua girl at DGB. And at the time, I just enrolled for the diploma at Cape Wine Academy. So I started off as an interview as a Kahlua girl, landed up as a wine ambassador, and the rest, as they say, is history. Wine has opened so many doors for me, especially bubbly ones, and it's been a wild ride, and I would never ever in a million years have dreamed that.
And we've got
an apron.
I've got Ronaldo, my producer, furiously searching for photos of Heidi the Kahlua girl. If we find them on the internet, we'll post them as quickly as we can. The love that you've discovered has branched into educating others about wine. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. This love of wine, is it possible to sum up, I suppose, your relationship with wine and why it is so close and why it means so much to you?
Senses. I think that every single bottle you open is like having a relationship and discovering the real spirit and heart of the wine, from the simplest wine to the most exotic, expensive, and beautiful wines. And then the people. It's just the whole community of wine people are naturally sharing, caring, and such generous souls. And it's just such a wonderful industry to be with, whether we're doing great or really, really in the doldrums, as we have been lately, is that the wine industry is a very, very small place that really is very generous of helping each other.
And that's exactly what you do, helping so many people through the Cape Wine Academy and helping them with your particular interest. You mentioned bubbles there. I know we're going to be trying some of the Genevieve from Melissa in just a second. Why bubbles? What strikes the chord for you there, Heidi?
It was also a lucky coincidence that I landed up working with Veuve Clicquot and Krug at DGB and landed up as brand manager and lost my heart to it, because there's something about bubbles that play with your emotions and not just your palate and your senses and your sensibilities. When you add bubbles to wine, somehow it transcends into such an emotional space. So I fell in love first with champagne, and then realized after working for Moet Tennessee and working for some of the best South African Cup Classique producers, that champagne's all grown up and can look after itself. Classique is such an undiscovered treasure. And in the 10 years that I've been fortunate to work with Cup Classique on many panels and mentored by some of the most incredible sparkling wine producers and judges and writers, it's really exciting how far we've come, and it's such a wonderful story. And it's as old as I am. So if you know how old Cup Classique is this year, you'll know exactly what my vintage is too. But it's a wonderful story to be part of, and that's why bubbles in particular, yes.
All right, I think we are back. Apologies for having one or two technical issues today. The internet playing havoc all over the place, but I think we have got our different guests back. So let's just check in and make sure everybody is still with us. Our special guests today, Ilse, Tuanni, Heidi, and Cathy, chatting to us from very different parts of the world. Apologies for that, guys. I suspect it's the internet playing up there a little, but we caught you right towards the end there, Heidi, and those love of bubbles and the education. I want to jump back to Tuanni and that idea of education, because it links everybody on the show today. You've not only studied, you've passed on what you've learned. Tell us a bit about the BLACC Cellar Club. We've had members on, we've had Wellington on the show recently, but give us a bit of detail and why this is something that's so important to you.
Well, it's very important to me. So I discovered them in 2018. I got invited to a BLACC Monday trip, and I was in for such a surprise. It's just a group of professionals who go around to wineries, and we taste, we get educated directly from the winemakers, and it's a really supportive group where, you know, members look out for each other. They hear about job opportunities. We have study groups together. We just hang out together sometimes, just go to dinner and drink wine. And I feel like it's a really good network to have in this industry, because sometimes we work so hard and we get so overwhelmed that we forget that, you know what, even though we're working in hospitality, we should also entertain ourselves. So it's a great community to have. So when I do want to go out drinking with somebody, or I want to practice my taste for my tasting exam, I have like a network of people. I can like put something in the group and immediately put together a tasting group or a study group. So I'm really proud of BLACC and the work that we do for the wine community.
And you should be, because it brings together such an important part of the South African wine community that hasn't always had a voice, if we're honest about it, which leads me to a question from the other side of the perspective. It's really important to you. How important do you think BLACC Cellar Club is to South Africa and broadening this horizon of people who understand wine, who can talk about wine, who can spread the gospel of wine into parts of South Africa where maybe it hasn't always been in the past?
Oh, no, I think it's key. I think one of the initiatives that we have for BLACC is to expand some of our education platforms to like Durban and to Johannesburg. In Cape Town, we're lucky because we get to go to the wine farms and we get to hear about the slopes and the soil and the organic farming techniques, like in person, right? And so, like, if you talk to anybody in Cape Town who works in the wine industry, they're pretty well versed. But sometimes if you go to Joburg or if you go to Durban, they don't have access to that information as easily. So they're not. But I mean, that's one of our goals, is to spread our education platform so that it reaches different areas. So when it's great for the consumer, because when the consumer goes to the restaurant and they order a bottle of wine, their sommelier, their wine waiter will know exactly like where that wine comes from, how it was made. You know, what we're learning in WSET level 3 is why it's so expensive. You know, why is, you know, a Tuanni wine twice as much as another wine? You know, we learn about all of that through visiting the wine farms and through some of the other education platforms that we have. So it just makes the experience really great for the consumer as well as for us, the members of BLACC.
Well, we know why Tuanni is so much more expensive, Tuanni. It's because you used to work there and they've been charging so much as a result ever since. It's all your fault, really. I've learned so much from you and from that BLACC platform, and during lockdown I jumped in on a number of those classes and they were great. I've also learned a huge lot from Cathy through the Cape Wine Show, but also, Cathy, I'm not sure if you'll remember this, I certainly learned a bit from a couple of wine evenings and a couple of tastings, a couple of very nice meals at a little spot called the Nose Bar many years ago.
Yeah, that still keeps cropping up from time to time, actually. So yeah, when we first came to South Africa, so it's about 20 years ago now, we actually opened, which was at the time the only wine bar in Cape Town, and we did that because it astonished me that in a wine producing country, when you went to a restaurant or a bar and you asked for a glass of wine, then your options were: do you want a bottle or do you want box? Or what was the other option? Do you want red, white, or semi-sweet? And that was your only options. And I couldn't believe it in a wine producing country. So yeah, we had the Nose for just under 10 years, I think it was. And we started doing a lot of wine education there, actually. I don't know if there's one of the evenings that you came to, but we used to do a lot of food and wine matching dinners with different wine farms, and then we had just our little unwind with Cathy on a Monday night. So we had a little wine course, and when we sold the Nose, that was really the angle that we carried on from there. And then we introduced WSET to South Africa, so we were the first person to start teaching those courses here.
I, of course, know what WSET is. I have, with great pride, my WSET 2 with honours, and I'm now waiting to do my WSET 3. But for people who don't know what it is, explain to people just very broadly what the WSET recognition is, what it means, and why it's important if you have a love of wine or are looking at the wine industry.
Sure. So it stands for the Wine Spirit Education Trust, and it was founded in London just over 50 years ago now. So it's a little bit older than Cathy and Heidi. So that's the same age as me, actually. And the mandate was for it to originally just teach people in the wine trade, and then they expanded that and they started teaching people in hospitality, and now they teach everybody and anybody. So it's the industry standard wine education courses in more than 70 countries around the world, and globally it is by far the largest educational authority in wine and spirits. So what we teach here in South Africa, we teach all the courses that are available, apart from a couple of sake courses that we can't do just yet, but we're hoping to. And these are courses that are great whether you're a professional drinker, as it were, whether you're actually in the wine industry, or if you just want to love wine and you just enjoy it and want to know an awful lot more about it. But they're very useful, particularly, and it's great that Tuanni is talking about all these groups and study groups and everything when she was going through her level 2, and now she's on her level 3, which I hope she's studying for really hard right now, because she's going to have her exam next week. And it's great to hear sort of things like that, because a lot of BLACC's members have also been and done our courses, a lot of other SOMs, because this is a qualification that then is very portable. It's one that you can then take and you can go and work on the cruise ships, you can go and work in London, you can work in New York, and that's something that I think has been really appreciated by a lot of our students here in South Africa.
In a broader conversation about wine education, your comment on the nose and what was offered, I think, speaks to where a lot of wine understanding perhaps was 20 years ago. What about now? Do you think the South African wine drinker is a more educated drinker, has a better understanding of where wine's coming from, what it's about, what he or she is drinking?
I think generally, yeah, people are a little bit more clued up about it. You know, there's so much more about wine online. Well, there's just so much more of everything online if you think about it. So it's much easier for people to access information. I think that the wine industry doesn't always help itself. It is quite snobby. You know, it does have quite a repressive sort of reputation that if you don't know anything about it, it's hard to get into. And part of that is obviously because it's not something you can really learn at school, because obviously you can't drink till you're 18, so you only come at it much later in life. But I think that, you know, the access that people have now through shows like this, actually, and through lots of other shows and other information on the internet, means that you don't have to feel a fool if you want to ask questions in a restaurant. You don't have to be embarrassed or think that the sommelier is going to look down at you or whatever it might be. And I think it's that confidence that people need to actually get into wine education proper. I'm sure Heidi's going to agree with me when I say this, but on our entry level, our first level, which is our level 1, we do teach about wine. Of course, we teach about wine, and we teach you how to taste it and how to store it and all the famous grape varieties and whatever. But the biggest thing I think we teach is confidence. You know, we teach people that you can do this. It's not some kind of mysterious thing that isn't open to people. You can definitely get into wine and enjoy it. And it doesn't matter where you come from, whether you've been a drinker before right now, you know, have some confidence and come and join us and have fun. And that's kind of what we start, you know, we hopefully say to people right from the beginning.
Heidi, your sense on that philosophy of Cathy's and her portrait of the South African wine world and the learning of wine?
Yeah, and I concur 100%. Is that you know, your first encounter with wine education really needs to be like a first date. You need to fall in love with it, and you find that from there, you know, once people develop a little bit of curiosity, passion. And one of the biggest tangible examples of how much appetite there is to learn about wine was possibly now just in the July liquor ban, when it was announced that they pressed the big red ban button. We were thinking about how terrible it must be for so many people in the restaurant industry, particularly in hospitality, that they now had this ban without anything to do again. So we opened an online course and we registered 2,000 people over the lockdown period, which told us two things. One thing is that people working with wine in particular, they really want to know about it and they want to learn about it. And perhaps they don't have the money and the time. So that gave us a very clear indication of how aware the people that serve wine in hospitality, retail, we had anybody that works with wine in any sort of form registering with us. So it's exciting. It means that the more that we're able to teach and we're able to share knowledge, is that the service will get better, the interest will get better, and everybody wins in the end. So I'm very excited. I think we've come so far in the last 5 years even, in terms of, you know, what you encounter with wine lists, with wine experience in restaurants. And there's a lot of work to still be done, but I think that it's really going there, and it's like a match to a dry fat.
Cathy's given us a great understanding of WSET and what that is. How does the Cape Wine Academy compare, contrast? How do they work side by side? How do they shape up?
Yes, so that's what's so exciting about wine education in South Africa now, is that the Cape Wine Academy is just over 40 years old, and it was established to really develop an interest in wine, to teach people to love wine and to build a wine culture in South Africa. So it was never solely intended for the industry. So it was never really set up to be formal training. It was meant to be a platform to engage with wine and fall in love with it. As time grew, it became very much an industry thing. But the biggest difference between WSET and Cape Wine Academy is Cape Wine Academy is all about Cape wine. It's all about, you do learn about wines of the world, but it's in a Cape context. So we pull everything back to a South African context in everything we do and at every level. So whether you're doing the South African wine course, which is a wonderful introduction and the tip of the iceberg, then the certificate, which is a great foundation course, and then into the diploma, which will then eventually take you into Cape Wine Masters. It is Cape wine that we are primarily interested in. And there's no other course in the world that will give you the scope and the breadth and understanding of South African wine that the Cape Wine Academy does. And that for that reason, there's hardly anybody that works in South African wine that hasn't had some sort of dealing with the Cape Wine Academy across the years. And Ilse, I'm really interested to know, because I think we might have been the same, we might have done our courses at the same time, just in different cities.
Well, let's check. When was your Cape Wine Academy time, Ilse?
I think it was 1995 and 1996.
So I think you just
And you mentioned it earlier, Ilse, and it obviously had a big impact on you. Frame it in a slightly broader sense, education in wine, because you've done wine courses at the business school at UCT, you've done the Cape Wine Academy. How important was that learning to getting where you are today in the world of wine?
I wouldn't have been here today without education, but I also think experience was very important to me, because I have more than 20 years experience in the wine industry, as I said, from wine tasting, freight forwarding, logistics. And today at Compagniesdrift, I'm actually doing everything from marketing, wine storage, logistics. And I think I had to do the wine tasting, the logistics, and I had to be at the different jobs to be successful at Compagniesdrift.
Which leads to the question I wanted to ask you. The story, the Meerlust, the Compagniesdrift, how does that work? How did that come about? And give us the history of what's a really exciting story and project in the Winelands.
Yeah, Compagniesdrift is very close to my heart. I started at Meerlust in 2006. And I was employed as an export administrator. And at that time, the general manager and CEO, Albert de Waal, who is my mentor today, had in mind of starting a Black empowerment company. And at that time, I wasn't aware of BE. And they actually introduced me and taught me of Black empowerment and the idea. And they started to involve me of starting Compagniesdrift. So in short, Meerlust invest in their workers, and they were looking for an opportunity to uplift their workers and also to empower them and give them economic independence. And Compagniesdrift started in December 2010 as a 50-50 partnership between the Meierburg Family Trust, who is the owners of Meerlust, and then the Meerlust Workers Trust, which consists out of 72 beneficiaries of different farms in Stellenbosch. And for a few years, we were a 50-50 partnership until we became a community-owned organization on 1 July 2019. And our main focus is wine storage. We offer wine storage to customers in the wine industry that doesn't have space at their own cellars. And we offer labeling services and reworks, where we pack orders for local and export purposes. So that's our core business. And then in 2015, we started with our Compagniesdrift wines under our own label.
One of which we're going to be drinking in just a moment. Before I do that, though, there's a real theme of education this evening. If I could ask you, Ilse, a couple of the lessons that you've learned from what you've done, from where you find yourself today, that you'd like to pass on, stuff that really resonates with you, maybe tougher times, difficult times, but things you've worked through and that you've really learned from in your time in the wine business.
I mentor, or I've been mentored by Albert de Waal and Hannes Meiberg, the owner of Meerlis, and mentorship is very important to me. And currently at Compagniesdrift, I have a team of 30 people, mostly farm workers, and I always tell them that if you have the passion and you are eager and you are willing to learn, nothing can stop you. Because I'm a managing director of a multi-million company, a big company that offer various services, and never have I imagined that I would do that today. And I firmly believe that I'm successful because I had the passion. I was always willing to learn and also prepared to take on something new. I was grateful for the opportunity to better myself. And every day it's exciting. I love what I do and excited to go to work because I can't wait for the new goal and what to do next.
It's such a wonderful story, and it's one I know that Tuanni can identify with, and I'm going to get her to mention why in a second. Before we do that, though, we are so long overdue, certainly me drinking wine. I suspect all of you have had a glass or two so far. You mentioned the wine as a reasonably recent introduction. I've got some of your 2020 Chardonnay Pinot Noir here. I know you're not a technical wine person, so just give it to us very simply, Ilse. Why do you like this wine?
Because it's pink. And I also think it was my choice because of a 2-month month, and there's a few other women on the platform tonight, and it's an easy drinking wine, a wine that I like. I like the color, I like the nose, the berry, the fruits. It's unhooded, so it's just easy drinking. And this wine is very special to me because of the pink. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019. And because of the pink color, we also partnered with the Breast Health Association. And for every rand that if we sell the wine, we also use a portion towards breast cancer awareness for our staff.
And if you didn't already need reasons to be drinking this, you've got another. It's got a lovely razor-sharp acidity to it, and it's a wine with a terrific story, not just the color, but linked very personally to Ilse's story of Compagniesdrift. Tuanni, Compagniesdrift, that features in your American presentations, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Cape Town is so small. So I actually had an online wine festival that featured Black and women winemakers. And Compagniesdrift was actually featured as one of the wines. So there were 6 different wines, and that one was brought in by Ruthford, a group of women investors who were trying to empower Black women, South Africans. And so they brought a few brands over to the U.S. They imported them over to the U.S. And then I purchased the wines from them for my festival, and then I sent it to my customers in America. So there were 6 different wines, so not everybody tasted all the different wines, but it's also part of the deductive tasting club that I have, and we meet every Tuesday and Sundays. And so Compagniesdrift is on that list. So Ilse, I'm going to call you up and invite you to that tasting group when we have it online.
I think you'll have a very happy Ilse to join that particular tasting. Speaking of women you support, Carmen and a lady called Carmen. That's the wine we're tasting with you this evening. Give us the Tuanni price analysis. What makes this one a rock star bottle?
Oh gosh, you have the Petite Syrah, right?
I've actually got the Carmen with me, but we can talk about the Petite Syrah.
Both of them are my favorite. I know both of them. Carmen Stevens is a wonderful winemaker. She owns a cellar in Stellenbosch, and she's the only Black female who owns outright a cellar. So she brings in her grapes, and then she crushes the grapes, and she makes the wines right there in her cellar. And the Carmenere has this really deep, dark color, and that's just because she lets it sit, the wine juice sit in the skins for a very long time. And then she does this gentle pump over process where she doesn't do punch down, she just does pump overs. And so you get this really like big, spicy, it's not too green, it's really fruity at the same time. But yeah, it's delicious wine.
It certainly is, and it's a grape that's got such a wonderful story, almost lost and forgotten in Chile, and now found in small patches across South Africa. And Carmen Stevens doing it great service indeed. Let's nip over to Heidi and the bubbles for which you are so famous. We've actually tasted these ones before on the Women's Month show. We had a compatriot of yours, a colleague of yours in the industry, Siobhan Thompson, presented these. I'm interested to see Siobhan's analysis versus yours. What makes the Genevieve stand out for Cape Wine Master Heidi Duminy?
I think so. Melissa makes it stand out. So Melissa and I met over at a champagne tasting, and it was around 2008. And she, afterwards we were chatting, and she said she was going to make her own bubble. She decided that it makes her so happy, so why shouldn't she make it? Make some happiness. And it's amazing how she's gone on to really, it is absolutely everything that Melissa is about. Melissa Nelson, who makes Genevieve, and Genevieve is her middle name, named after the patron saint of Paris, whom apparently her parents were so fond of visiting. But I know that Mel has been trying to make a rosé for a while. She found a home in 2017 in the Ruthford area, and there's some Shiraz on the farm. And when she first introduced this wine at a tasting that I was at recently, I'm going, Shiraz and Cap Classique? Ooh, I'm not sure. Because you'll know that Shiraz is usually quite a punchy wine with, massive tannins, and Bubbly just doesn't love Shiraz unless you're making an Australian style heavyweight. So I approached this wine with some skepticism and said to her, but why Shiraz? And she said, well, it's because it's what I've got on my farm. So, duh. And I just think that she's done the most remarkable job with it. It is so dainty and so pretty. And it's very upfront fruity, but you definitely get a leesy richness, the etching of it. And this absolutely tiny, weeny little bubble that just tingles and tantalizes your palate. And it's just very, very alluring, very Moorish. And it comes with, you can honestly sense the love, the hard work, and Melissa in a glass. So that's why I chose this one. Yeah.
I think if the Genevieve needed a PR campaign, I think it's just been filmed there, and very clear to see just how much Heidi adores and understands the world of Cap Classique. Our live broadcast on Facebook is having a little bit of an issue with comments coming in, but I see Clint Van Heerden is one of the people watching on YouTube. Shout out to Heidi and to Debbie, two ladies who've had such a huge impact on my wine journey. Well, I think you're one of many there, Clint, and thanks for watching and for chipping in. Our final taste, I know you don't have the bottle with you, Cathy, you're having to make do with some other wine you've got in the UK, but you wanted to have a quick chat about Cathy Marshall. We had her on the show a little while ago around Pinot Noir Day, another one of our extraordinary women in wine who does make some rather dazzling wine.
She is. She's an amazing woman, and I think a lot of her achievements are hopefully still getting celebrated. But for me, she was, I think, the first woman to have her own named brand named after her in South Africa. So she started out, she was one of the very, very first garagiste winemakers as well. So she actually made her first wine on Muizenberg Beach. They sort of trod it on Muizenberg Beach and they called it Barefoot. Now, if anyone's been hanging around any perhaps of the other supermarkets, and this one that this show is sponsored by, you'll see that there is a brand from America called Barefoot. So she had to change that brand, and so she became Catherine Marshall Wines, and that's the first woman to have a brand named after her in South Africa. And she's been a little bit of a nomad. She's wandered around. She hasn't really had a cellar, but now she has a cellar in her own of her own in Elgin. And one of the wines that she makes, and I'm doing the best I can here, is a Riesling. So this is a Riesling. This is actually a German Riesling I'm drinking here. This is of course is BLACC, so it's a wine that I can't really get very much in South Africa. So I'm tasting it because I'm practicing for my exams. But Cathy's Riesling from Elgin. Elgin really is probably the best place to make Riesling. It's very cool, and you get this beautiful steely minerality. My students will know that I don't like the word minerality on its own, but you have to put something else with it. So this steeliness, this sort of tightness, which is what you find in Cathy Marshall's wines. I also like Cathy Marshall very much because we get confused with each other very often. So every now and then I get an email come through from somebody who wants to order 3 cases of Pinot Noir. And I don't actually even go back to them and tell them they're wrong. I just forward it on to Cathy and then she deals with it. And every now and then she gets an order to come and join a level 2 course. And I think she just forwards that to me as well. So it's quite cool. Cathy's a very good wine name in South Africa, I think. We have lots of wine Cathys. And Cathy Marshall is definitely one of my favourite ones.
The League of Cathys supporting each other in the wine industry and support everywhere. Ilse just commenting there that she worked with Cathy at Armani and sold Barefoot at the tasting room and still remembers the labels at that time. And it's something we see so much on this show, how the link in our wine community is so strong and people go back and know each other or know people who they know, and it makes it such a wonderful and vibrant and warm community, as we have seen this evening. And we've had a great wine education. That education is going to continue for some of you because I'll be jumping over in about 10 minutes or so, hosting this evening's Durbanville Hills Wine Dinner with Pick and Pay and Chef Jonathan. So if you're one of our guests there this evening, I'll see you over there shortly. But for now, so there we go. That's with Durbanville Hills. That'll be kicking off in about 10 minutes time with Martin Moore, the most talkative man in the wine industry. But before I head over to that, a chance to just say a quick thank you to all of you and to remind everybody that if you are interested in learning a little bit more about wine, I cannot recommend highly enough, go and jump on to thewinecentre.co.za and have a look at those WSET courses, or head over to the Cape Wine Academy. I think it's capewineacademy.co.za as well, and have a look at what's there and join Cathy and her team, or follow the work of Tuanni and her wine tastings in the BLACC Cellar Club, also a great space for understanding, or just head out to Compagniesdrift and go and grab a glass of wine. And if you're lucky, you might bump into Ilse and share some of that wonderful Chardonnay Pinot Noir with her. Guys, to all 4 of you, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the education, and thank you for the role that you'll play in South African wine. It's always a pleasure spending time with all of you. And in particular, Cathy, good luck with the exam. I hope it goes really well. And to the rest of you, hope to see you soon. Hope to have some wine with all of you soon. And thanks so much for being part of Dan Really Likes Wine this evening.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
So there we go. Women in wine, which is almost at an end. It doesn't, of course, mean there won't be any more women on the show. We've got so many of them, as we've discovered this month. Most of the wine industry is run by women, and that's, I think, why it does quite so well. But our specific Women in Wine month wraps up next Monday, and gee, have we got a selection of guests for you there. It's again, it's kind of a legends collective. So we have got Vivian Kleinhans from Seven Sisters, Angela Lloyd joining us, Winnie Bowman joins us, and the great Norma Radcliffe of Warwick fame, the first woman ever to be part of the Cape Winemakers Guild. She'll be joining us on the line from Canada where she finds herself at the moment and drinking with her some of her 2009 Warwick Cabernet Franc, which I'm getting quite excited about already. A big thank you to everyone on the show. Tuanni there, a great show. Admire all you lovely ladies. Well, I know it is mutual, and I know it applies to everybody watching as well. So to all four of you, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being part of Dan Really Likes Wine, and we'll see you back again Monday evening for another live show and another great celebration of South African wine. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.